Yeah. Working well.
Okay, fine.
Something connect.
Mine. There you go. Good. Can you hear?
You got it?
No.
Yeah.
It's good. Let us give it one more chance.
Okay, no problem.
All right.
You can do it without.
I can't. I don't understand why that doesn't work.
No, me either.
Oh, well, no headphones.
Okay.
There you go. All right.
Sorry about that.
Now, we just appreciate any way you're doing it, so no problem.
So you let me know when you want me to go.
Okay. Yeah, if you just kind of want to share, I've talked and the kids researched a little bit about you, but maybe just about your career and kind of going from high school to Notre Dame to the NFL and broadcasting, and then the kids maybe could ask you some questions if that would work.
Yeah, sure, no problem. Well, you know, I mean, sports has been a part of my life forever, my kids' lives as well. I have a brother, Bob, who's 6 years older than me, and a brother, Greg, who's a year and a half older than me, and we were all in sports. We all played football at Notre Dame. My brother, Bob, played in the NFL for 13 years. I played in the NFL for 9 years. Our dad played in the Canadian Football League for a number of years. And he basically coached us at a young age, and we played all sports. And I know it's one of the big differences nowadays is a lot of young men and women kind of go to one sport earlier. And I know there's a lot of pressure either from parents or coaches to do that. I think it's a shame. I think it's great to be kind of a multi-sport. I think it works a lot of different parts of your body and helps you overall. If you look at like an NFL draft per se, 85% of players drafted, and there's about 330 players drafted every year, 85% were multi-sport athletes in high school and earlier than that. So I think that's a real positive way. So we did everything growing up: football, baseball, we wrestled, track and field, did all that. In fact, the first time I high jumped, I think in 6th grade, I did the high jump and I made it over the bar, but I missed the pad you land on, and I landed on the deck. And I didn't have a long career in that. But like I said, my dad coached us and everything, and we all went to the same high school. And then my brother Bob got recruited by all the big schools around the country. Like I said, I was like 12 at the time, and he chose Notre Dame. So I got to kind of see Notre Dame from the eyes of a 12-year-old, from the years of Joe Montana. I don't know if how many of your students are going to know some of these names. You have to Google, but Joe Montana is one of the greatest quarterbacks ever play in college and the pros. He was on my brother's team, but I got to see a lot of these stars when I was 12 years old. So it gave me a good look of like, wow, look at this, and look at this is a goal for me, something that I would love to do. And then when my brother Greg went there, I was only, like I said, a year and a half younger than him. Now I got to see all of these student athletes as peers because they were closer to my age, guys that I would be playing with and against. So I got to kind of see Notre Dame from two different perspectives. So that helped an awful lot. And, you know, going to Notre Dame, it was more working on the athletic part because of my parents, we had the academic part. You know, there was no way we could go to Notre Dame without having good grades. You can be the greatest football player in the world, but if you don't have the grades, or greatest athlete, I should say, if you don't have the grades, you're not getting in. The NCAA, for those that don't know, has a minimum standard that you have to hit to be eligible to play. So that was always first and foremost in our house growing up, was athletics is great, but if you don't take care of your academics, it's going to mean nothing to you, and it's going to take you a lot further in the long run. So that part of it we always took care of early. So it was the sports part of it. that we knew we would have to close the deal, and that's what we did. So when it came my turn to be recruited, I was fortunate enough to be recruited by all the big schools around the country, but I had already had such an affinity for Notre Dame from being there since I was 12 that it was kind of a no-brainer. If I didn't go to Notre Dame, I probably would have gone to Michigan, which, being from Ohio, is really frowned upon. Like, if you're a big-time recruit in Ohio, if you don't go to Ohio State, you're kind of shunned a little bit. So we were persona non grata for a while in Ohio because we didn't choose Ohio State. And Notre Dame years were fantastic years. Loved it. And then went to the NFL for 9 years, and I actually met my wife my first day of school at Notre Dame, and so that obviously worked out pretty well. 33 years of marriage and 3 kids later, it's all going well. But the NFL years were great. 9 years, Houston Oilers. For those, again, you're a little young, that's the Tennessee Titans now. They used to be the Houston Oilers, but they moved. And the Philadelphia Eagles, and then the Miami Dolphins, where I finished my career. And got to play with a lot of great players and got to do a lot of great things while I was playing. And then, going at one thing my father and my parents always taught me was prepare for everything, because you never know when your opportunity is going to arise. So even when you're learning things that you wonder at times, why am I learning this? You never know when it's going to come to fruition, when you're going to need it. And I was all of a sudden, after football, asked if I wanted to try radio. Forget, most times former athletes would go into the booth when you're watching a game and you hear the analysts in the booth. That's normally what we did when we retired. We would go into a booth. My brother Bob did that as well. But I was asked to do 4 hours of morning radio every day. And this wasn't even at ESPN. This was in Phoenix at first. And I was like, wait a minute. Now that means I got to talk baseball. I got to talk hockey. I got to talk basketball. How do I do that? And through the work ethic I learned as a kid, I said, okay, I got to dive in. I know all these sports as a professional athlete, but there's intricacies to them that I need to learn as well. So I threw myself into that and did what I needed to do. That was another big thing with my parents. If you want to achieve something, if there is a goal out there that you are really looking for, sometimes you have to sacrifice things. And I told my kids this. They had goals at a young age. They wanted to play football at Notre Dame. My daughter swam at Notre Dame. She was an excellent swimmer. And I said, okay, you're setting that as a goal for yourself, which is great. Everybody needs goals. But understand what you have to do along the way to achieve those goals. There have to be some sacrifices. You know what? Sometimes you can't go out with your friends. Sometimes you got to get up a little earlier than you want to get up, but you have to do. Sometimes you maybe can't eat the things that you want to eat. And I'm not saying all the time, but there are sacrifices that you have to make and things that you have to do to learn your craft, whatever you're having. It doesn't even have to be sports. It can be anything. If you want to achieve it, there can be some sacrifices you have to make to get to that goal. And we did that. We learned that from our parents, and I tried to teach that to my kids. So what it does, it becomes kind of ingrained in your head. So, all my kids are out of sports right now. My son, Jake, owns 2 businesses, two Orange Theory fitness studios with his wife. So he's running businesses and he understands, he put in the time to learn. My daughter is a trainer. My son, Mike, works at ESPN. So it just becomes kind of natural. It was for me as well. Okay, I'm going to do this now. I know the work I have to put in, and it doesn't catch you off guard like, oh my God, I got to do all this extra work. Well, because you've done it starting at a young age, you understand that you have to do the extra work to get where you want to go and to get your chance and to just be ready. I think one of the more interesting things, so that was one, going into radio when I really had no idea, but I basically said, yeah, I'll do it. And I said, I'll make sure I learn along the way. One small part of that was when I got released by the Houston Oilers, I went to the Philadelphia Eagles. And for those that don't know, it's obviously a whole week of preparation for a game on Sunday. Well, I signed with the Eagles on a Thursday. I didn't know, all of a sudden they run a completely different defensive scheme than I was used to in Houston, completely different. But being that what I learned at a young age, I dove into that book, to make sure I knew it. I wasn't expected. I dressed for the game, which was 2 days later on Sunday. a couple days later on Sunday. When I got there on Thursday night, I signed. So I had Friday, Saturday, and then the game was on Sunday. And I remember at halftime of that game, I wasn't going to play. I was dressed, but I wasn't going to play because I hadn't been there long enough to really know what was going on. And I remember at halftime, the defense was playing very bad. And we were in the locker room at halftime, and Buddy Ryan, who was the head coach, looked at me and he said, "You ready to go in?" And I was like, inside, I was going, "Oh my God, I've been here 2 days." But I said yes. I mean, without even hesitating, I said yes, because I had looked enough at the game plan and looked enough at their defense to at least know the basics. And then I had the confidence that I could go out because of that and at least just try and get to the ball carrier, do what I was supposed to do. So, you never know when that opportunity is going to happen or where you're going to be called upon. So being prepared as best you can, again, even if you don't know what you're preparing for, just by learning, you have an advantage when something comes about that you may not know is going to come about, and you're going to jump right into it and at least have some knowledge or confidence because you put in some work that you can get the job done. The toughest thing is when you're asked and everybody kind of shies away. Who's going to step forward and make that move? And then I think the best thing that, before I let you guys ask some questions, I think the best thing that I learned from sports and why I love sports so much and why I did it and why my dad did it and why my brothers did it and why my sons and my daughter did it is twofold. It's the work ethic that you have to do to be involved in sports, as I talked about. And so when you get out of sports and into the real world, because sports for most people are done after high school, but that doesn't mean you can't put in that work ethic in high school to get it done. Some go on to college and some are fortunate to go on to the pros. It's a long shot. We all know that. But what it does is you're used to doing that work to prepare, that when you're not in it, you are preparing. You're not, it doesn't come as a shock to you that you have to do that work. So that's been a big thing for me, and I think a big thing for my kids when they had set their goals and what they wanted to do, and then afterward, the work ethic was just there. So and the other thing was the team aspect for me is when you play on a team, you learn to trust one another, you learn to rely on one another, and that again goes on to any aspect of life, any job in life where you're working together with other people, is to have the work ethic to know that your part of it is going to be taken care of, and B, that you can put your trust in the person next to you, because that's what we had to do on the football field. I had to know my job was taken care of, but what I didn't need to do was try and take care of my neighbor's job. Our kind of a line in football was take care of your own house. If I had a certain part of the field, the guy I was over part of the field, that was my responsibility. I wasn't going to try and do the guy's job next to me. That's his house. He needs to take care of it. And I need to rely on him and he needs to rely on me, that we're going to take care of each other's responsibility. And if you need help over there at times, you'll get the help. And the one thing about sports that always happens really in life, you're going to get knocked down. You're going to get knocked down. You're going to get your nose blooded. Your eyes are going to water. And then it's, how do you react to adversity? So, and football is a very physical sport. And I remember early on getting just smoked, just hit the deck. And it's just, you got to get up and you got to go do it again. And sometimes your teammate helps you up and sometimes you help your teammate up. It's just a great, I think, learning tool, not only the joy of being a team and having success as a team together, but then what it does for you afterward, how you can rely on other people. That was one of the big things that team sports, really all sports, but I'm talking about the team sport and relying on others, did for me. And, I've had a great career of 25 years at ESPN, and I'm not there anymore, but I'll get back into it again. I just love to talk sports and just talk to people. So that will continue. And I've probably talked too long here because I want to give you guys a chance to ask some questions. So go ahead and fire away.
Real quick, before you guys start, that was great. Thank you. He mentioned Joe Montana. So you guys should know him from class, that he played with his brother at Notre Dame. And then he mentioned Buddy Ryan, which we haven't, that name might not sound familiar, but we've talked about the 85 Bears defense. So Mr. Golic's head coach with the Eagles was the defensive coordinator for the Bears, that kind of legendary defense from the 80s. So if you're asking about coaching and stuff, we've looked at them so far. that was his coach with the Eagles. But so you guys did a good job the other day. Let's just kind of round robin. If you have a question, ask it, and then try to wait for some other people to ask the next question. And then if you don't want to ask, I have the ones you wrote out, and I can ask them. But I'd rather you guys ask, and you did a great job on Monday. So take it away. Whoever wants to get.
I have a question. How was the recruiting process different than it is now? I'm getting ready to play college golf, and I got my name out to coaches through internet sites and emailing them. How did you do it back when you were being recruited?
Boy, that is a great question because it is so different. Now, I was getting recruited in 1980 before all of you were born. And how it worked back then was it was after my senior year and playing in high school. So we finished playing football probably in November. That's when you took your trips. Now you have athletes committing at freshmen, sophomores, juniors. Both my sons and daughter committed their junior year. So they played their senior year in high school knowing they already had a scholarship. So it's very different. And we didn't, like for my sons, I did what you did. You get your name out there. I made like highlight tape reels for them, DVDs. I say reels or tape, and y'all don't know what I'm saying. DVDs that get sent out. That wasn't done back when I was getting recruited either. It was just coaches going out and talking to college coaches, going to their recruiting area and talking to high school coaches, and then going into that high school and looking at tape or having the tape sent to them. It was way different. So there was a lot more work by the colleges going out to try and find the talent, where today, like yourself and like others, you can send your videos to sites. Colleges will look at sites now that are specific to showing highlight reels of swimming, of football, of golf, whatever. So you can get kind of a sense of, okay, that's someone, now I'll take the next step and go visit, as opposed to college coaches always had to come visit first because that was the only way to get to know us. So it's night and day. Now you can really get your name out there. The trouble is everybody is doing it. You're competing with so many people out there. So, it's about getting that great tape out there and getting in front of coaches and talking to them. The best thing you want to do is end up getting in front of a coach so you can show your personality to that coach. But that's a great question because I couldn't believe all the camps that go on now, the Nike camps, the Adidas camps. I never went to a camp in my life, but these camps now, and I understand it because they can showcase, because it's another place for all the coaches to come see them. So there's definitely opportunity, which again, as I said earlier, leads to, I think, people focusing in on one sport a little too early. But I say that a little too early only because from my time, it was too early. Nowadays, you know what, I can understand, especially you're going there in scholarship, you're saving some money. I mean, congrats to you. That's a huge win.
Do you miss being on Mike and Mike, and do you still talk to Mike Greenberg?
I miss doing the show. Greeny and I did it the longest. I had a partner before him and Tony Bruno, and I had two partners, Trey Wingo and my son Mike after him. Greeny and I, the interesting thing with Greeny and I is we didn't live near one another. We were an hour and a half from one another. And I had 3 kids by the time our show started. He didn't have any. So while we were geographically far from one another, also where we were in our lives was completely different. So we didn't hang out much at all. I mean, we were friends because we were doing the show together, but we never hung out. We were never close enough to each other to hang out. My kids were all in Little League sports then, so I was coaching them, or I was the lunch dad at school, while Greeny, was an hour and a half away. And he actually had both of his kids during our show, during the 17-year run. So we never socially hung out a lot. We were more friends through the fact that we were partners on air than anything else. So, I see him like at Super Bowls, not this one, obviously, because nobody went to it. But at bigger sporting events that we all still go to, I'll run into him, but that's really about it.
What were the biggest struggles that you faced being a student athlete in college?
It was amazing that I think the best thing I can say is and everybody unfortunately falls in a different position. What kind of foundation did you had going into college? So I was fortunate enough to have two parents that stressed academics. So they made us always prepared in high school. All three, me and my two brothers, we were all 3.5 or better. So we all had the good grades. So we were built that foundation at home so that when we went to college, that we knew what the struggles were going to be. And at Notre Dame, I talked about that NCAA limit that you have to at least be at. Notre Dame was higher than that. They actually missed out on some great players because they didn't fill their academic basement, from one way to put it. It's like anything else. It's just an extension of what you're doing in high school. It's time management. I found that, and I wrestled in high school as well. So I played the football season. It ended in November, and then I'd go right into wrestling until March. And I actually found that academics during me doing a sport worked better because my time was basically set for me. I knew I had practice. I knew I had, study hall. I knew I had film. I knew I had lifting. So all my time was regimented. So I knew I had to regiment time for academics. It's when I didn't have a sport and wasn't doing a sport, when I had a lot of free time, it would be I'll get to it. I'll get to it. And then, all of a sudden, believe me, I was a guy in college at times, the night before a 10-page paper is due, I'm down there typing away, trying to finish it. But during my sport, I was acclimated more to whatever the itinerary was. So I focused on my time better. It's harder, don't get me wrong. I mean, it is definitely harder. And the one thing I would tell people is, and this is another one of those sacrifices, maybe when you could have some free time, if you're struggling, seek out tutors, seek out study hall, seek out help, because there are people, understand, colleges want you to graduate. They want you to graduate. It looks great for their numbers as when you get to a graduation rate. So they want it. So they're going to provide help. They're going to do your work for you, but they're going to provide help for you, but you have to seek it. You now are considered a young adult going into adulthood, when that was one of the weirdest things my freshman year in college. I'll never forget getting up for the first day of classes and thinking to myself, if I didn't want to go to class, I could just turn around and go right back to bed. Now, at Notre Dame, there are, and in a lot of other schools, there are limits. I mean, you get like 3 absences and starts getting held against you, but it's all on you, whether you decide when you want to go, what classes you're going to take to a certain extent. So that would be my advice. If you're struggling at all, don't wait just because, I don't want to take up more time. It's college, I want free time. Seek out the help if you need it. But for me, again, I had a really good foundation at home, which helped me academically at Notre Dame.
So since you played in the NFC East with the Philadelphia Eagles, what do you think about the Dallas Cowboys, and what was your favorite moment playing against them?
Any moment we beat them would be my favorite moment away from them. As I know, I'm talking to a lot of Cowboy fans. There wasn't a lot of love between Buddy Ryan and Jimmy Johnson back when those two were the head coaches in Philly and in Dallas. Those were some really good games and some really good fights in those games. There was not a lot of love lost between those two teams. I remember we had a nice victory against them on a Thanksgiving when I was in Philly. And then when I was in Miami in '93, we beat Dallas in Dallas on Thanksgiving as well, when there was snow, kind of what you guys are going through now. Well, there was snow all over the field there as well that year. Every now and then it happens for sure. But yeah, those are some really good games. The worst one was my last year in Philly in '92. We beat the New Orleans Saints in the first round of the playoff, in the wild card round. And then we went to Dallas to play them in the divisional round, and we thought we were going to whoop them. We had way too much confidence, maybe too much. And we went to Dallas, and they smoked us. And at Dallas, and I don't know how many of you remember with your age, they won the Super Bowl that year on the next year, '92 and '93. So that was a tough one against them. But Emmitt Smith is a guy I probably played against the most in my career. 2 times a year, for 6 years while I was at the Eagles, and then in the playoffs as well. Nate Newton, one of the former linemen, Mark Stepnowski, these guys are all the guys that I played against the most. So there were some really, really good battles against them.
Kind of piggybacking off that, this was one that a student wrote. Do you have a certain moment in the NFL that just kind of sticks out, or a certain game that sticks out more than another?
Probably it would be against Dallas. I think it was in '89. We played them in Dallas, and we set a team record of sacks that game. We sacked Troy Aikman 11 times. And for me, I am not a pass rusher. In 9 years of playing football, I only had 11 and a half sacks, so that's not really good. But in that game, I had 2 sacks, and we had 11 sacks overall. And I mean, we just pummeled Troy Aikman in the group that day. So that one really stands out to me as one of the more fun games that I played. And then probably our playoff win in New Orleans was a really big moment as well. But as a defensive lineman, and our job to get to the quarterback, and we were able to do it 11 times that game. That one stands out as one I'll always remember.
Can you talk about the gangrene, the 1991 Eagles defense, and how dominant they were?
That was a year that we thought we were going to go to the Super Bowl. We thought we were going to win the Super Bowl. But in the first game of the season, we played against Green Bay. Our quarterback was Randall Cunningham, you see all the great athletic quarterbacks now. Well, Randall Cunningham was probably more athletic than all of them. He was unbelievable. He could run. He was quick. He was fast. He could throw the ball a mile as well. And in the first game against Green Bay, he blew out his knee. He got hit in the side of the knee. I remember our defense standing on the sideline. We ended up winning that game, and we thought, again, going into that year, it was our year. We stood on the sideline, and we were like, no way that just happened. I mean, in an instant, one play, 1 second, you're one of the top quarterbacks in the league and a guy that's going to help us go to the Super Bowl, we felt, is done for the year. So while our defense was number one against the run, number one against the pass, number one overall, number one scoring, I mean, our defense was number one in everything that year. Unfortunately, offensively, we went through 3 or 4 quarterbacks trying different ones. So we were averaging 10, 11 points a game, 12 points a game maybe. So it was, unfortunately, we didn't do what we thought we were going to do. But that defense I played on, and this was before everybody's so used to knowing free agency. Well, there was a time when there was no free agency, and that didn't come about till 1993. So the guys I played with in Philly, we played together for a while because, again, there was no free agency. There was no movement. You signed a contract, you were basically on that team unless they cut you. So, playing with Reggie White and Jerome Brown and Clyde Simmons and Seth Joyner and Eric Allen, I know these names aren't going to mean a lot of you. Maybe Reggie White does. But these were just incredibly great players that I got to play with for so many years. But more importantly, became really good friends with because we were together for so long. We were friends away from the field and certainly friends on the field. But that defense was, and Buddy Ryan, again, was our coach then, but he was really a defensive coach. All we did was attack people. And if you're a defensive player and you get to attack, you love it. So that was... We had a lot of great defenses those years. That year, we really thought we were going to cap it off with a Super Bowl win until we lost Randall in that first game.
This was a good question. Once you started broadcasting, were there any interviews you were nervous about or that stood out more than others?
Oh, sure. Listen, I was nervous, especially starting out. And in all honesty, you never become perfect in anything you do. You strive for that, but it rarely happens. In all the years, so again, I started doing morning radio in Arizona and then went to ESPN. So in 25 years of doing radio and having to interview, I would say we figured it out one time of my years at ESPN, probably over 19,000 guests in that time frame. The worst thing I did, and the thing I really had to work the most on, was my questions, how to ask questions, open-ended, close-end. Don't ask someone a yes or no question if you don't have them on a lot, because they may just say yes or no. Ask them an open-ended, what, where, how, so they have to explain a little more. And then the one trap I fell into, especially early on, if I had a football guest on because I played football, a lot of times I was asking a question I already knew the answer to, and I would give my opinion while I was asking the question. And the next thing you know, I'm asking a 45-second question, which, you're having a guest on to hear the guest. I have plenty of time on air to talk if I want to. So one of the biggest things I had to learn was basically shut up and just ask the question. You have your guest on, let them talk. So ask them a short, what, where, when type of a question so they'll answer it. The most nervous, especially early on for me, was probably having the commissioners on of all the sports. The Gary Bettman of hockey and Bud Selig back when he was the commissioner of baseball before Rob Manfred, David Stern before now David Silver, is the commissioner of basketball. Adam Silver, not David Stern, Adam Silver, and then Roger Goodell. So having those guys on, because that was my world was the sports world, was to have the commissioners, the top guys in those leagues on, because you knew you were going to, no league is run perfectly. There's always some tough situations. So having to ask those questions, and I never wanted to ask any in an accusatory way. I brought them on, they came on the show. I'm going to let them explain. If I disagree, I'll say I disagree. But that was probably the most nervous early on was talking to the commissioners of sports, because being in sports broadcasting, these were basically the highest level guys. Players, there was never a player I was nervous about, because I played in the NFL. I played with a lot of great players and met a lot of, great players in other sports, from the Jordans and the Gretzkys of the world. So interviewing them really wasn't an issue to me. The people I loved interviewing the most, quite honestly, were those that weren't involved in sports. I loved interviewing the entertainers, the Kenny Chesneys of the world, the Darius Ruckers of the world. Having those guys on, to me, was a lot of fun, and can kind of, just kind of relax and just have fun and let them do their thing. But to go full circle, early on, it was definitely the commissioners in the leagues that made me nervous.
What was your favorite team to play for in the pros?
What's that? Say that again.
What was your favorite team to play for in the pros?
Oh, definitely the Philadelphia Eagles. I spent 2.5 years with the Houston Oilers, and then 6 in Philadelphia and 1 in Miami. In Miami, I was kind of hurt that year as well. But without question, the 6 in Philly. And I love Philly. Philly's kind of a blue-collar town. I'm kind of a blue-collar guy. That's where my first 2, Mike and Jake, were born while I was playing there. And just, we got a chance to kind of settle in the community being there for 6 years. So that definitely was the most fun for me of the team that I associate myself with the most.
So obviously the Texans released J.J. Watt. Do you think they should have done that? And where do you think he'll sign? A lot of talk says he'll go to Cleveland, but I'm a Cleveland fan, but I think he'll still go to Pittsburgh.
Yeah, I mean, he's definitely going to, well, and again, he had the 1-year, $17 million deal, so I'm sure they were thinking of the cap money, and he's been nicked up a lot, realistically. I mean, he's 32, 2-3 years more, because his body's been beat up a lot, and I don't know if he can be the main guy. And so you talk about going to Cleveland, you have Myles Garrett on one side, him on the other side. I would suspect he would go to a team that would compete for the title, because that's what's missing for him. And there will be teams like the Kansas City Chiefs, like the Pittsburgh Steelers, though we don't know with Pittsburgh, is Ben coming back? How much of a step back are they taking? Some guys in their O-line might be retiring. So Pittsburgh may be going back a little bit, but I could see him wanting to go there because his 2 brothers play for Pittsburgh. So 3 brothers on one team would be a pretty cool thing. So I could definitely see him doing that for that reason. Outside of that, I do think he would probably pick a contending team, seeing that's really the only thing missing off his resume.
This kind of goes with Nicole's first question of how recruiting has changed. A lot of kids were wondering, how did media change from when you first started to finishing this kind of chapter in 2020?
Do anybody there, they know what a fax machine is? I mean, when I first started doing the show, that's how people either communicated with our show, by phoning in or sending a fax. Again, I don't know how many of you know of a fax machine. You have tiny scanners on your phone now. But that's how we would communicate. The communication, it wasn't instantaneous. It was, and we were a show that didn't take many calls. So we would occasionally get a fax of people who wanted to ask a question about something. So there really wasn't a lot of interaction. Now, fast forward to now where there is instant communication. You instantly know, is a topic hitting, and you don't completely rely on social media to say, do we keep talking about this or not talking about this, but you can use it as a gauge. So that's been, I think, the biggest difference, not only in the media, but in the sports world as well. I was always someone, when you're in a locker room doing interviews, you didn't really disclose things that went on in the locker room. The locker room was where the players, that was our place, and you didn't talk about it. And I've always been that guy. But players today talk more about it in social media. And I remember on air, I would always say, I don't agree with that. They shouldn't do that. And it was really my son, Mike, who's 31 years old and grew up in this social media era. He said, Dad, that's the way these guys do it now. So that's their form of communicating. They communicate it with everybody. And I had to kind of not be that old man on the porch, yelling at the young kids, get off my lawn. I had to understand it's changing. So social media is changing the way everybody communicates. Sometimes good, sometimes bad. I mean, when I have, we're all sitting around on the couch right next to one another, and everybody and people are still texting each other, sitting next to each other on the couch. It's like, wait a minute, just talk to the person, I mean, so there's some good and some bad to it, no doubt about it. But that's probably one of the biggest things I learned, and we incorporated into our show was Twitter and was Instagram and was social media. And just, I had to become more involved. I'm not a great tweet person. I'm not a great social media person, but I knew I had to get involved in it to reach an audience because I knew it would grow. It's a little over 750,000, I think, of followers. So, okay, I want to reach people. This is a way I can instantly reach all of them, and hopefully they'll listen in turn. Greeny had over 1 million followers. Trey Wingo had over 1 million followers. Our show had, as a whole, had over 1 million followers. So it was a way for not only them to reach us, but to us to reach them as well. Throw out questions to get instant. When you're getting 10,000 responses in 3 minutes on something, you can kind of gauge where you're going off of that a little bit. So as opposed to when I first started in this, and it was just you and your producers and your who you're working with in a room talking, because there really wasn't much feedback. It is, like I said, I think there's can be a lot of good, but also I think, as we all well know, a lot of bad as well.
So what do you think about the draft class of 2021 with Trevor Lawrence and Justin Fields? What do you think how they're going to be in the future for, one for Jacksonville and the other one for, hopefully, I don't know where he's going, but hopefully Justin Fields goes somewhere. What do you think about him?
Oh, he's going to go somewhere. I mean, I think Trevor Lawrence will be the first quarterback taken. Then I think Wilson from BYU will be the second quarterback taken. Fields, I think, will be the third. I mean, you have Mac Jones. You have Trey Lance from North Dakota State. You have Kyle Trask from Florida. You could have 5 or 6 quarterbacks going in the first round. Teams will always reach for a quarterback because in the pros, that's the most important position on the field. So sometimes they'll do stupid things to get them or give up a lot to get them, but they know that for the most part, we're not going anywhere unless we have an elite quarterback. So in all honesty, if I were Jacksonville and they have the first pick, I would trade my next 3 first-round picks to Houston and try and get Deshaun Watson. Deshaun Watson for the Texans is 25 years old. He's one of the best quarterbacks in the league. He is what you're trying to accomplish. When all these teams draft these quarterbacks early in this coming draft, they're all hoping one day they will turn out to be a Patrick Mahomes, a Deshaun Watson, a young star. So you already have one in Deshaun Watson. So if you have to give up some assets for him, I would take Deshaun Watson, obviously, over every quarterback in this draft. Trevor Lawrence is getting a huge, and he deserves it. I think Trevor is going to be fantastic, but Deshaun Watson already is. There's a 50% hit rate on first-round draft pick quarterbacks. So 50% meaning half the time they're really good and half the time they're a bust. Deshaun Watson is 100% a franchise quarterback. So I would try and get him, but only one team can get him. The others are going to have to go through the quarterbacks now. And it is a good quarterback class. You got 5 or 6 who I think could play pretty well. And Trevor's obviously going to be the first one taken, no doubt about it. But it's always interesting of what happens before the draft. Like we already saw, Matthew Stafford go to the Rams, and we saw Goff go back to Detroit. What other quarterbacks move before the draft? Is Carson Wentz from the Eagles going to get traded? That will affect the draft, because if he gets traded to a team that was going to draft a quarterback, well, now that team doesn't have to draft a quarterback. So everything starts to change a little bit. Jacksonville, if they don't trade for a quarterback, they'll take Trevor Lawrence number one, and then everything will fall from there.
You mentioned this just a second ago. Your son, what was it like the last 3-4 years working with your son on the radio show?
I mean, again, I did it at ESPN for 23 years, and it was the best of the 23 years. I know the Mike and Mike years got the most attention and made the most money for ESPN, and were the biggest years for me as far as accolades and things that we got from it. But as far as self-enjoyment, it was working with, your kid. I mean, there's nothing like it. I mean, and it's something that we appreciated and didn't want to take for granted. I mean, just every morning for the last 3 years, at 6 a.m. in the morning, you flip on the microphone and there's my kid sitting right next to me talking sports with me. Not always agreeing with me, thinking he's right more than I am, which most kids do to their parents, I guess, all you kids out there. But just seeing him grow in it, in the industry, now has his own show, and will continue to grow. He's one of the young, hot kind of broadcasters that ESPN has right now, more than a few of them, really rising up. But to me, that was the height for me, to be able to work with my kid for those 3 years and now see him grow in the business is really cool.
What do you think of the college playoffs? Do you think there should be more teams added, like 6 to 8, or do you think it's fine with 4?
No, I think more should be added. Now, I don't know if that's going to make a difference, because right now Alabama, Clemson, Ohio State are really the 3 at the top, and then there's a drop off. But I think there should be more, and there's a lot of, you have the Power 5 conference, and if you're asking this question, I'm sure you know some of this. Then you have the Group of 5, those conferences not in, the big conferences, the Big 10, the Big 12, the ACC, the SEC, and the Pac-12. There's the other conferences, and we saw other schools like Cincinnati, and we've seen other schools like Central Florida have really big years, and some go undefeated and they don't get a chance in the playoffs. Now, I don't know how they would do in the playoffs. Some people think they would get smoked in the playoffs, but they're playing the schedule that they had. I would like to see it opened up so at least they would get a chance. And let's see. So I would go 8 at the most. 6 I go to, and then I go to 8 as the most and stop there. Because then you're getting into a lot more games, and the physicality of the game makes it tough to keep going. But I would definitely open it up a few more spots to give some of those Group of 5 teams a chance, and even others, because there are some years where you get 5 or 6 teams that are really, really good. And, you never know what it's going to come down to. So I am definitely for them expanding the playoffs, but I wouldn't go higher than 8, but I would definitely expand it.
If any of you haven't asked a question, or you've only asked one, why don't you guys chime in to get some different people asking?
What was your transformation from college football to NFL football like?
You're going from 18, 19, 20, 21-year-olds who are playing in college and going to school, your classmates in sports and out of sports, and then you're going into a job. I love the sport, but it's now your job. Now you're going into a sport where you're playing, in college, you go to practice, then you go hang out with your fellas afterward, go to training table and eat, and you all get to hang out, whether it's studying or whatever, but you're all kind of together. You go to the pros and everybody goes their own way. A lot of guys are married, they have families, it's their job. You're coming in for your 9 to 5, though, as I'll tell you in a minute, it can be a little more than that. But that was the biggest difference. From a social standpoint, it was just so different, because now you're going into 21-year-old and you're playing with guys that are 35, 36 and everything in between. Guys who are single, guys who are married, guys who are married with kids. I mean, it's bizarre. Definitely a change of workplace. And I remember when I got drafted thinking, man, the NFL is going to be great because I don't have to study. I don't have to go to class. You know, I don't have to go to training table. So I'm going to have so much free time. And man, was that a joke? Was that a mistake? I mean, I was usually in by 7:30 every day, and I wouldn't leave really before 5:30 or 6. You do more in pro sports off the field than you do on the field, because there's a game plan to go over. There's meetings, there's films, there's lifting, and then there's more films. You watch film before practice, you watch film after practice. So what an education it was for me to say the work, because now again, this is everybody's job. Your livelihood depends on it. If you don't do well, you stop getting paid. Listen, the pay is great. So you want to continue with the pay. But if you don't do your job, that's the one thing in the pros. I mean, they'll get on you if you're not doing your job to try and correct you. But at the end of the day, it's on you. You're not going to be a professional. There's a difference of being a pro athlete and a professional on how you conduct yourself. And if you're not getting the job done, you're gone. And that's just the way they'll find somebody else. That's the way it works. So it went from fun, magnitude of fun from high school to college to still fun in the pros, but truly a business and a job in the pros.
So what do you think about the Carolina Panthers? My brother's a Dallas Cowboys fan, but I'm a Panthers fan. So what do you think about them, the Panthers?
Well, I mean, they got to work on the defense again. I know they just got rid of K'Wan Short. They've lost their linebackers. Kuechly was phenomenal. Greg Olson. They just basically got old in a lot of places. So they're going to have to go through that. The only person they really put money into was McCaffrey. So the first thing they're going to have to do is decide, is Teddy Bridgewater your quarterback or not, and go from there. That's, again, always the start. I know he signed a deal. It wasn't all that much money against the cap. So I'll be interested to see where they start there. And then you build. You have a young coach in Matt Rule, who turned around a Temple program, who turned around a Baylor program, and the expectation is he does that in Carolina. But that will be the interesting thing for me, is all of a sudden you had that really good D-line and excellent linebackers. Now they've kind of aged out. You've aged out of your tight end. What do you do at the quarterback position? So I'll look to start there. In all honesty, if you want to give up a couple of first rounders and Christian McCaffrey, trade that to the Texans, I would do that. So that would be the first thing I would look at for Carolina. What do they decide from their quarterback position?
I thought this was kind of a cool question that a student wrote. Whether it's in today's game or when you played, was there a certain coach you wish you had been able to play for?
Yeah, probably Andy Reid. I'm a big fan of Andy Reid. I've known him for years, and obviously coached in Philly after I was already out of the league, but I've gotten to know him even better over the years. And I think he's a good mix of he can be, a stern coach, but he's also going to be a player's coach, an incredible mind. Now understand, I had in my three places, I had mostly defensive coaches. Like Jerry Glanville in Houston was a defensive coach who was a head coach. Buddy Ryan was a defensive coach who was a head coach. Most of my years there were with Buddy. I had a little bit of Rich Kotite, who was an offensive guy. And then I finished with Don Shula in Miami, but that was just for a year. Andy was that really smart offensive guy as well. But he could be, when you're the head coach in the NFL, you're really like the CEO of a company. You're running the whole thing. But he would be one. I have a lot of respect for Andy that I think I would have liked to play for him.
So you mentioned the Jaguars. How do you feel Urban Meyer will do with the transition from college to pro coaching?
So here's always the interesting thing to me, and I hope it doesn't sound like a cop-out. There were 7 new head coaches, and really only one that was a household name. That was Urban Meyer. But all the other coaches, I remember reading a couple of articles after about grading the coaching hire. This team gets this for hiring this guy. And all of them, every one of them, is a first-time NFL head coach. We know Urban Meyer's been a head coach, but a first-time NFL coach. And this is my answer. I have no idea. And you know what? They don't either. The team has no idea. There is a monster difference from being an assistant coach or a coordinator, then all of a sudden you're in the big chair. Now, the one thing Urban does have in his favor is he's been in the big chair in big time college sports, where it's even more than just sports, it's business as well. And he's been successful, obviously big time at Florida, big time at Ohio State, what he did, hell, at Utah and Bowling Green. But so he is at least used to being in that CEO position. So that works in his favor. But also, you're now dealing with players that all of a sudden, this is, again, their job. Some of them are making more than you. Now, I know he got a good deal, but there'll be some guys on that team making more than him. But now you're dealing with professional athletes who you're not going to do rah-rah college stuff to them like you may have done in college. And I don't think Urban was a rah-rah type of a guy, but there is a difference in dealing with 18 to 22-year-olds who are in college as opposed to dealing to 22 to 40-year-olds who are in the pros. They're getting paid to do this. This is their job. This is their livelihood. So that I don't know how Urban reacts to, in all honesty. And again, the assistant coaches from the NFL who became head coaches, now they are used to dealing with professional athletes like this, but they're not used to sitting in the big chair. So I truly have no idea what the biggest cop-out answer, but I'm going to give it. Some will do good and some will do bad, but that's how it is every year. But to sit there and Robert Saleh, who was the defensive coordinator in San Francisco and now goes to the Jets, I like the guy a lot. I really do. I have no clue how he's going to do as a head coach. A lot will depend on who he hires. Again, he's a defensive-minded coach, so who does he hire to run the offense? But everybody has new hope when there's a new coach. Everybody has new hope when there's a new quarterback, but we really, really don't know.
This is more a question that I'm just curious about. My students didn't write it, but how did your show change when it went from just radio to when it was then on radio and TV? Did you notice any sort of change, or pretty much it was the same?
So this was my first question, because obviously if you're radio, I can dress in sweatpants and a t-shirt. Now, ESPN had a little more of a dress code than that. I couldn't really, but you could. I would just wear a t-shirt a lot of times and jeans because I'm on radio. Nobody sees us. So when they told us we were going to be on radio, that's the first thing I asked. The very first thing I asked, because I was already doing some studio work as well. It was called NFL Live. And a studio show on in the afternoon. And for that, I had to wear a coat and tie on TV. And that's the first thing I asked. I said, wait a minute, we're going on TV. I said, do I have to wear a coat and tie? Because, man, if I got to get up at 6 in the morning or 4:15 in the morning for a 6 o'clock show and I got to put on a coat and tie, I'm not going to be real happy about that. I mean, I would have done it if that was the rule. But they said, no. This is going to be a radio show on TV. They said, treat it like a radio show. Dress the same, act the same. If you'll notice when you watch TV and you'll see a group of people sitting on a set, a sports show, and they ask an analyst a question, a lot of times that analyst will then be looking at one camera. It's called the one shot. Like before a show, they'll say, Golic, your one shot is camera 2. So I'll know when I'm going to talk, I would look at camera 2 and it would shoot on me, and that would be the only thing you'd see on the screen is my face. Well, for this, we never did that. Or we never were told. It was like, just do your radio show. We will shoot around you. We may put the camera on you on a single, but you don't have to be looking at it. So do the exact same things you would do on a radio show as you would, normally. Now, there was a difference to further your question. Our ratings became very good on TV as well as radio. So then at some point they wanted to switch it more to a TV show on radio. We had more graphics. We had more things we did that were visual, which I wasn't as big a fan of, because now all the people driving who listened to us going to work couldn't see what we were doing. If we threw up something visual up there, well, they couldn't see it because they were in the car. I didn't like that we did that. That was ESPN's choice. We got to go along with that. I wasn't a fan of it. I liked that it was just radio on TV. Do the radio show for the radio audience and let people who want to watch. A lot of times for our show, people would get up in the morning and turn our show on TV and listen to it like it was a radio while they would go about their morning, getting ready for work, right? Getting dressed, taking a shower, whatever. It would just be kind of on and they would listen to it. And then they'd get in the car to go to work and flip us on the radio. So it was kind of the same thing.
All right, real quick, Dylan, hold on. We've got about 7-8 minutes before you would need to go to your next class. So especially if you're someone who hasn't asked a question, you're running out of time here. So Dylan, go ahead. But then if anybody else who hasn't talked, make sure you get.
Are you more of a fan of the radio or the TV part?
I'm more a fan of the radio because you can be, for TV, like I talked about NFL Live, a studio show, when it would come to me to talk about something, I would have about 30 to 45 seconds to make my point. So I had to have my point and have my top 3 points I wanted to make about my topic. And sometimes I couldn't get all 3 in because time would run out. You got to keep moving on. Radio, man, I had 4 hours every day. So I always had time to expound on what I wanted to talk about. So radio is way more free form, and I like it a lot more than TV.
I got a question.
Mm-hmm.
I know you went against like a lot of great running backs in your career, like Barry Sanders, Walt Payton, late years. Who was like the toughest you'd say going against matchup wise?
Interestingly enough, the first tackle I made as a pro was against Walter Payton when I was with the Houston Oilers. Pretty wild. I didn't realize it. I knew he was a running back and I made the tackle, but it's not like I'm on the field going, oh my God, I just tackled Walter Payton. But when I saw it in film the next day, I was like, wow, that's my first tackle. It would be Emmitt Smith. Again, he's the guy I went against the most. For those that don't know, he holds the record for the most yards rushed for in NFL history. But he's a guy I went the most tough as nails. I mean, he is a guy I hit the hardest in my life. He ran a wide play, and I was an interior D lineman. So I was running. I got to full speed when he was by the sideline. I mean, I was about 290, 295 pounds, running full tilt as he was by the sideline. And I launched myself and I tried to separate his body in half. I wanted to hit him that hard. And I mean, I smoked him and he went flying out of bounds and he just popped right back up and ran back to the huddle. And I was just like, wow. It's like, think about being in a boxing match with someone and you just punch some guy as hard as you possibly can punch him. And they just kind of flinch and then look back and keep going. You're like, oh God, that was my best shot. And that didn't do anything. I always remember that about Emmitt going, wow, man, I hit him as hard as I could and he just popped right back up. But yeah, he was the toughest.
So what do you think the Philadelphia Eagles need to do? And what do you think about Jalen Hurts? And what do you also think about them firing Doug Peterson this year?
Well, I mean, that was the choice. Doug didn't want to continue with Carson Wentz and the owner did. That's where, again, we get into the business side of this. You know who always wins? The owner. It's his ball. It's his money. He signs the checks. Listen, gang, that's the way life works. He who signs the checks has the power. You know, it may always not be the greatest thing in the world, but that's just the truth here, certainly in the NFL. So Doug Peterson had different ideas at quarterback. This owner wanted to still have Carson Wentz. So that's what happened. Now they still may trade Carson Wentz, depending on what they can get for him. They'll take a huge cap hit for it, but they may do it. I'm still not sure about Jalen Hurts. I mean, we saw some, but we didn't see enough to know for sure. You love what he did in college, but to me, it's still, you know, that grade A, B, C, D, E, F, or there's I, incomplete. It's still incomplete to me with him because I didn't see enough. I do like him a lot, but it was still, I didn't see enough to know if he's going to thrive in this league or not.
I got a question. Besides like football and stuff, like what all other sports are you like interested in or like watching on like TV and stuff?
Well, I don't really watch it on TV because when I say wrestling, I don't mean WWE, which is very cool, by the way. I remember watching the first WrestleMania back in 1985. I loved it. But like wrestling, high school, college wrestling, Olympic wrestling. Like I said, me and my brother Bob both wrestled in high school and in college. I love wrestling. I think it's a phenomenal sport, one-on-one, man. You against somebody else. It's a team. You have other teammates, but man, when you're on that mat, it's just you and another person, and best person wins. So I love wrestling. I love swimming as well. Like I said, I swam. That's the first sport I did competitively. My daughter swam all the way through college, so we went to a lot of her meets. So, and I've grown to really enjoy lacrosse as well. When we moved to the East Coast, my boys played lacrosse. My daughter didn't want to play lacrosse because she saw my brothers play, her brothers play, and she was mad when she tried to play it. She started hitting people like they did, and you can't hit in the women's lacrosse. So she said I didn't want to play it anymore. But so I'd say lacrosse, swimming, and wrestling are three sports that I really, really love to watch.
I've got a swimming question because my sister swims. I don't really enjoy it that much, especially sitting at the meets. What was your favorite college swim meet that you ever went to?
Wow, favorite one. I mean, there was one we went down to Texas. I really enjoyed one at Ohio State. I really enjoyed the Big East or ACC championships. I enjoyed the bigger meets. Like my daughter was between 10 and like 13 or 14. She was ranked like in the nation top 10 in some strokes. So we'd go to like junior Olympic, junior nationals and things like that, sectionals and all these different things. So in all honesty, I enjoyed going and watching my daughter practice. I just loved swimming so much. But I know what you're saying about the meets. They can be long days and you don't get a whole lot of time when all of a sudden you swim and it's over and you're like, I just sat there for hours for 100 freestyle that took, 50 some seconds and now we're done. It can be a grind. There's no doubt about it. But man, I loved watching her swim.
Yeah, it's always worse is like my sister, she's in like the first event and the last event. So I'm sitting in the natatorium that's like 1,000 degrees. It's just miserable.
It is a sacrifice. There's no doubt about that. You definitely got to bring things to do to entertain yourself.
All right, guys, we probably have time for one more question. So if somebody wants to ask.
Who do you think the greatest running back of all time is?
I would probably lean toward Walter Payton because he incorporated power, speed, quickness. Obviously Jim Brown is going to be in there. He was really that power guy. But I think I would lean more toward Walter Payton, and I think have a little bit of everything, catching the ball out of the backfield. That he would be the guy for me.
All right, real quick before we're finished. I feel bad that kids have to go to a different class. I wish we could just do this all day, but you talked about the importance of academics. So on Monday, we had a guest speaker and a couple of my students asked this, so maybe we could finish with it, especially since a lot of our seniors. What life advice would you give to kids as they're leaving high school and heading off to college or the workplace?
Well, I would say, it's not always at this time you know exactly what you want to do. So don't be afraid to try different things. Get out of your comfort level a little bit. Don't just go down that one lane. Try other things. Be open to new experiences. That would be my advice. Is, like I said, I was a multi-sport guy that tried different things growing up until I got to one. And I like I said, I wrestled in college, so it was still two there. So that would be my advice. I mean, work hard, understand the things you are doing, and don't be afraid to raise your hand. Don't be afraid to get involved, because the best experience is firsthand experience. So get involved. You know what? You're not going to be right every time, and you can learn from that as well. But that's okay. A lot of people don't want to think they'll be embarrassed if they're not right or if they're wrong about something. Man, don't worry about it. Just dive headfirst into it, man. Just get involved. That would be my best advice. Get involved.
Well, we can't thank you enough as a class. And for me personally, this is crazy to have listened to you for 15 years and now kind of having a conversation. So thank you very, very much. We really, really appreciate you taking the time to do this. And I think it'll be kind of a lasting impression on me and the class. So thank you very, very much.
Oh, my pleasure. Enjoyed it all. Everybody take care and stay warm.
All right. Thank you.
See you.